to now introduce our speaker today, Kim Bailey. Kim Bailey, MSG, has worked in the field of gerontology as a lecturer and aging expert for 30 years. She holds a Master's of Science degree in gerontology and a BA in sociology, both from California State University of Fullerton. Ms. Bailey is the Program and Education Specialist with the Alzheimer's Orange County, where she is responsible for developing and presenting programs and education for families and professionals throughout the community. Ms. Bailey has a long history of academic, corporate, and nonprofit experience. So with all that being said, I will now hand it over to Kim Bailey.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lauren, so much for your introduction. And I'm excited to be here with all of you today as a speaker. Normally, I'm in the role of host. So this is a great opportunity for me. And I wanted to use it to introduce you all to an important program that we offer here at ALS-OC, and that is our Memory University. Memory University is a 6-week course that is intended for the person with very early Alzheimer's, MCI, or some other memory problem. It's for them and their partner, their significant other. And throughout the course of the 6 weeks, we teach a curriculum. Sometimes faculty teaches it, and sometimes expert speakers in the field are here on hand. And so what I'm going to try and do today in the kind of impossible time frame we have is to run through the highlights of the 6-week curricula so that you can know how we work so closely with people who are experiencing early memory loss and their caregivers. So it's sort of an introduction to our organization, and at the conclusion they will have had an opportunity to bond with other people who are walking in their shoes and to get familiar with all the other programs that we offer through our organization. And so it's a way to get people off to a good start. And then, of course, we are going to serve them throughout the whole continuum of the illness. So as they gather together, you're going to see, you're going to kind of experience the way they get together and observe the curriculum. You'll see it through their eyes today with this presentation. So our objectives for our Memory U folks are to have a better understanding of the disease process, to understand the difference between MCI and dementia, Alzheimer's disease, learn a little bit about symptoms and the diagnostic process. We also teach them that beyond medications that are available for early Alzheimer's disease, there are healthy strategies that can help them to take control of their illness and live well with their diagnosis. We also take a look at safety issues. I typically have a driving expert come out and talk to them. I also have a gun safety expert. And then I have actually a nurse practitioner who comes out to talk about clinical trials. So that's kind of a sprinkling of the topics that we have, starting with understanding early memory loss. So I'm going to go through this like lightning fast because I'm going to operate under the assumption that most of you have a basic understanding of Alzheimer's, although we do always have new people. So therefore, we continue. So we talk a little bit about the continuum of these illnesses. People start, up here at a relatively high functioning level as they get older. We call that normal aging. For some people, we see some changes and they go into an arena called subjective cognitive decline, which then leads to mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. And then for most folks with MCI, things change over time, continue to change, and they develop dementia. So just a little bit about MCI. It's a condition where the individuals have memory deficits that are starting to show up on testing. The difference between MCI and dementia is that when you have MCI, you're typically not having problems with functioning. The activities of daily living, all of the things that we do, driving, cooking for ourselves, managing bills, etc. So in the very, very earliest stages, the preclinical stages of dementia, you don't see interference with those things. But then as people start to move into dementia, you're going to see areas affected and that have to do with functioning. So sort of think of that difference as MCI is where you've got brain changes showing up on testing, but dementia is where you're seeing problems in several domains of functioning. And of course, we all know that we use dementia as a broad umbrella term. It really is, it describes any progressive degenerative brain impairment that affects memory, thinking, and judgment. And I think most of us are aware that the most common form of dementing illness is Alzheimer's disease. So here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but over on the left, you see sort of a host of the most common types of dementing illness, and they are irreversible. On the right side, you see just a short list, and it's actually a very long list of conditions that can mimic dementia. And some of the top reversible causes are depression, problems with a new medication or interaction between meds, maybe some deficiencies in nutrition, could be thyroid disease, infections such as UTIs, etc. And there's a lot more on this list. And we use this slide to build a case for people getting a good thorough diagnostic workup for the illness because some are reluctant to do that, and we say, well, gosh, in a certain number of cases it turns out that your symptoms can be reversed. And so that brings us to our first poll question.
Okay, some types of dementia are reversible, true or false? Go ahead and quickly answer. Again, this is not a knowledge check, but a check to make sure that you are actively listening. So very quickly, some types of dementia are reversible, true or false? We'll give it a few more seconds. Again, some types of dementia are reversible. If you're not able to answer on the screen, please do type your answer into the chat box. Go ahead and end the poll. And correct, some types of dementia are reversible. I'll hand it back over to you, Kim.
Okay, thank you. And again, some of those things we saw on the list, like depression and medications, they may cause dementia-like symptoms, but those are not true dementias, and those can be reversed. So thank you so much. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. There we go. So what does a good diagnosis look like? This is it. We need a full medical and family history. There's comprehensive physical and neurological exams, full blood panel, looking for problems there, some type of imaging, be it a MRI, CT, or SPECT scan, neuropsychological testing, all the pen and paper tests that are done. And it's still, although diagnostic techniques have improved greatly, it's still by and large a diagnosis of exclusion. So they want to take away all those possible causes for the symptoms and before they arrive at a diagnosis. Okay, so I've already said AD, it's the most common form of dementia. It's progressive and degenerative, meaning that it is a terminal illness that gets slowly worse. It worsens over time, causing problems with memory, communication, thinking, behavior, organizational skills, etc. The symptoms, and we're careful to tell people this in Memory U, the symptoms can vary widely from individual to individual. So each person's journey through the illness is unique to them. The biological markers for this illness, I've got two up there. There's three. Amyloid plaques, protein tangles, and atrophy is the third one. So you've got the protein amyloid, which is overproduced in the brain and is causing sticky plaque-like substances around the brain cells. Meanwhile, the tau protein is overexpressing in the form of neurofibrillary tangles inside the nerve cells. And then all of this leads to eventual death of particular brain cells, and that's what causes the atrophy or shrinking of the brain. Plaques and tangles, as I said, amyloid builds up between the nerve cells. Tau is attacking from within. They're still trying to figure out how this all works, but we know that these substances, these proteins, block communication between the cells and eventually, are so disruptive that the cells die. Who's at risk? What are some of the potential causes? We don't know the exact cause of the disease, and scientists feel like it's probably going to be multiple causes. It's either just some of the risk factors, age, of course, as one grows older, the chances of getting Alzheimer's disease are increasing. I think about 1 in 10 over the age of 65, maybe almost 1 in 2 over the age of 85. And then also, it should be known that although it is a disease of aging in many respects, the late onset Alzheimer's disease is very typical. We also have a young onset disease, which is usually linked to family history and genetics. And those folks can be affected by the disease, I don't know, as early as like the 30s or 40s, more commonly the 50s. There's really, and then of course, gender is a risk factor. More women than men are thought to have Alzheimer's disease or other types of cognitive impairments, and certainly women are at a greater risk for being caregivers as well. So women are at the epicenter of this illness. So those three things, age, family history, and gender, we can't do anything about. But what we tell people is that some of the other things can, be in our control, and that's usually lifestyle factors. So if you have diabetes, heart disease, or vascular problems, that increases your risk. And so that those conditions need to be controlled, well controlled by medication, but also by exercise, diet, etc. Head trauma, we ask that people protect their heads. I'm not a fan of contact sports because we've seen so many problems with boxers and football players. But you could also be in an accident. It could even be an emotional trauma that places you at risk for the disease. So protect your brain. And then folks with Down syndrome, people who are born with Down syndrome are at the greatest risk for this illness. And 100% of individuals with Down syndrome have the pathology in their brains as they age. The plaques and tangles are present. However, not all go on to develop Alzheimer's disease, but they are in the highest risk group because of their extra chromosome, and that chromosome expresses amyloid, so they get a double dose of amyloid, and that's a very simplistic reason why they get Alzheimer's disease. So take a look, all of you that work in the field, you'll recognize these symptoms. We know that it's short-term memory versus long-term memory. Long-term memory stays intact for a very long time, and you can look at these other areas and they all may or may not come into play with individuals who are experiencing early memory loss. Communication, again, it's differing from person to person, but in general, we see that people are having word finding deficits. They're getting words mixed up. They're losing their train of thought more readily. And we see the repetition that is very characteristic of this illness, where people are repeating words or questions over and over again. And that's because the hippocampus is at the epicenter of the disease. It's kind of the grand central station of our brains. All the new information is rushing in and out. Normally, with a normal, quote unquote, normal brain, there's a mechanism to save new information so you can then retrieve it. But in Alzheimer's disease, that switch, if you will, is broken. And so all information is unable to be saved. And therefore, people, have lost that information sometimes within minutes of first hearing it. So it's not their fault, and we need to be very patient as people repeat, and we need to answer their questions and carry on. So, tips that we give are to take extra time to just take a breath, take a deep breath. Deep breathing is top of my list for good tips for folks not only with memory loss, but just for all of us who are working in the field, etc. Take some deep breaths and I can't even say it. Get oxygen to our brain. I'm trying to go too fast, I think, folks. If people get stuck on a concept or an idea, then they can always come back to it later. They can ask the people around them to speak more slowly and more clearly. And we tell them you are not alone. These kinds of things that are happening are very common to the illness and not your fault. So, as I've said, each person's progression, it's going to be unique to them. In general, however, memory disorders progress slowly over a long period of time in the absence of other comorbidities. So the focus that we have in Memory University is on how to live well with these illnesses. That said, as the disease progresses, individuals will need more help and more support. And so we ask that they graciously accept that help from their support network. These are the ways of treating the symptoms. You see on the left-hand side, all of the drugs that are used to treat Alzheimer's and other types of memory disorders. Over on the right side, you see a different class of drugs that are there to support people who are experiencing anxiety, depression. These conditions often coexist with the disease, and although we can't cure Alzheimer's, we certainly want to try to treat things like anxiety and depression, which can actually help people to feel more alert and function better. Agitation, sleep disturbances, all of those things are something that you can talk to the doctor about. And of course, we could do a whole lecture on the cholinesterase inhibitors and memantine and some of the newer drugs that are available for early stage, but you have the slides and you can reference these different treatments and learn more about them. We always stress the importance of clinical trials. I feel as though it's the only way we're ever going to cure this disease and find the answers that we need to help people is through the willingness of early stage individuals to participate in trials. And there are many opportunities. And here in Orange County, we have a number of opportunities, including UCI Mind. And here are some of the places that you can, or some of the websites where you can research clinical trials. There are pros and cons to each, and trials are not for everyone, but we certainly want to make our early stage folks aware of this, as well as some of the caregiver studies that are going on as well. So, tips on living with the changes. You can just take a quick look at this slide. And it's pretty much about asking people, to try and adjust best they can to their new normal, to be flexible, to educate themselves, and to expand their network. And then an important caveat at the end of this slide is live each day to the fullest. So this is certainly the time to break out that bucket list and do the traveling or other things that other goals that you want to meet. This is the time. This is a mantra that we give to folks that are involved with early stage, the 4 C's. I think it actually stems from Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's the 4 C's. We didn't cause it, we can't control it, we can't cure it, but we can choose to have a good day. This piece is about sharing the diagnosis. When we meet people early on in the disease, they're sometimes reluctant to tell others, but we try to give them the benefits of sharing the diagnosis with others, including the fact that it might be more stressful trying to hide the symptoms. And at the same time, people may have noticed changes in you and they are relieved to know why, and that it's actually a medical cause. So, and it's just an opportunity for your loved ones to be on your team and to offer help as needed. So the next section is about some of the pillars of successful living, successful aging and healthy living. And you see all of the 6 pillars here, and we will touch on each of them briefly. And the importance of this section can't be underestimated because this gives some control back to the person with the diagnosis. Perhaps the doctor said, well, here's a prescription for these pills and didn't take it any further, didn't have an opportunity to talk about lifestyle changes and how they can affect the outcome. And so this gives us that chance to do so. So looking at this slide, oh, ugh. This is a snapshot of the average diet for Americans. And you can see that it's hideous. It's so heavy on fats and oils and heavy grains and sweets. And look, there's just a little section, little sliver for fruits and vegetables, when in reality, it's supposed to look like this. We should fill up half of our plate with fresh fruits and vegetables and, you know, wheat grains, healthy diet, dairy products, and they should be low fat if possible. And then some lean proteins, lean meats and fish. Fish is brain food. Strawberries are brain food. I mean, all of the things you see here really kind of represent a Mediterranean diet. And a Mediterranean diet is what has been recognized as a healthy and sustainable dietary pattern. And it may reduce cognitive decline. And that's what it looks like. Daily, weekly, moderate portions of dairy products and limited red meat. Exercise and physical health. So I think that most researchers agree that if any one thing emerges as a preventative for Alzheimer's and other types of memory impairments, it might be exercise. And so we know already that physical activity reduces the risk of diabetes, heart disease, depression, and stroke. And if you are already living with these conditions, it helps to manage them. So you want to manage and control these conditions. But the exercise also enhances immune system function, it prevents falls, and it improves the connections amongst the brain cells. And that brings us to poll question 2. Lauren? Oh, thank you. Hello.
Slowly but surely getting there. Poll question number 2, exercise can reduce a risk of diabetes, heart disease, depression, and stroke. Again, if you're unable to answer the question on the screen, please do so in the chat box. I need to have your answers into the chat box before the poll questions close. Again, exercise can reduce risk of diabetes, heart disease, depression, and stroke. Is that true or false? I will go ahead and give it a couple more seconds. Looks like we have everybody in. And correct, true. I will hand
Great.
that back to you.
Yeah, great job, everyone. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So, we challenge our participants in Memory Review, and I challenge all of you to think about the kinds of things that you're already doing. If you have a good pattern in place, do you think you could step it up a little bit? If you're starting from scratch, see your healthcare provider. But even if you just decide to walk several times a week, you're going to see a benefit. All of the things I'm talking about will help you to see a benefit. So it's never too late, and we can always improve. We don't have to be perfect and we don't have to run marathons, but we can improve. So, in addition to an exercise program, we want to make sure we're checking everything else out thoroughly, other health concerns. So we want to keep up with the doctor visits. We want to pay attention to hearing loss and sleep issues. By the way, did you know that hearing loss, if it goes untreated, can lead to dementia? And also the same with sleep issues, sleep apnea, which I think I have a slide on. People, if they don't treat that and they don't wear the CPAP, that can, obviously cause problems with the blood flow to the brain and can cause cognitive issues. So we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to tweak head to toe, and we want to take our medications regularly. And if we have depression and anxiety, we want to remember that those can be treated and they need to be treated. So another pillar of successful aging is cognitive stimulation. Research has shown that this benefits memory and thinking in people who already have memory loss, and it certainly helps as a preventative. So then as in addition, there's positive effects for well-being. And you actually see that with everything else that I'm talking about. You know, when you change your diet, when you change your exercise routine, you start walking, you're going to feel better emotionally as well as physically. So these are, again, not only great things for people with early dementia to do, but all of us. So here's just a few activities. You can think of some of your own, but the main thing is we want to use areas of the brain that are not usually being stimulated. So things like learning a new language can be really helpful, or doing some of the activities you see on this screen. Sleep and relaxation play a critical role. Sleep's essential to overall, emotional well-being, physical health, etc. Sleep promotes cognitive brain function by helping the brain to form new connections. I don't think a lot of people realize that our brain is working during the sleep process. It's clearing out toxins like beta amyloid. And when you get into that deep REM sleep, that part of sleep, the sleep cycle, actually assists in consolidating your memory. So we need sleep for our brains. We need to hydrate our brains as well. So lots of water. Sleep apnea, I touched on, it's frequent, it's characterized by frequent pauses and breathing. And so, it can lead to further decline. As I mentioned before, we need to use the sleep apnea treatments, even though they're not popular, they're critical for our brain health. Here's a few tips. You can read them on your own, maybe on your own time. Stress reduction is key. We know we need to think about what is triggering stress, and we ask our individuals with early dementia, what is stressful for you? And they'll tell us things like, well, being in a crowd or being taken to an event where there's a lot of chaos. So actually asking them to think about what triggers stress and then having them make others aware that they need to draw boundaries. And so, for example, they can change the environment if they're feeling stressed, if it's loud or overwhelming. Maybe they can't leave, but you can certainly appreciate that they need to find a quiet place to calm down and refocus. And, we want people to take breaks, take a breather. If you're doing a task and you have early dementia and it's not going well, come back to it later. Maybe you're just tired that day or having a bad day. We all have our good days and bad days. So also talk to people about what you're experiencing and try to incorporate some great relaxing activities like music, gardening, keeping a journal, walking, whatever it is, meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, all of those things can be great stress reducers for people with early at any, stage of dementia and their caregivers. Okay, another really critical pillar of successful aging is social engagement. And we've seen research that shows that it leads to well-being throughout the life cycle. People who make that effort to get out and be active say that they report this, they feel happier and healthier. And that's because social activities are linked to better psychological and physical health. So, and then we offer our folks in the Memory University an opportunity to get together with other families who are experiencing cognitive issues as well, because we have a special program that's designed for people with early memory loss. It's a place where they can feel comfortable and supported. And that is our Connect to Culture social engagement program. So, They're people with early dementia, or actually it's any stage, and their partner can connect and socialize with other like individuals and their care partners in, just some fun activities around the county. We go to Bowers Museum on a monthly basis. We have we have a physical therapy course at Oasis Senior Center. We have Memories in the Making art classes. We have dances at Lakeview Senior Center and at Segerstrom. We go to the symphony, all of these things that incorporate, a lot of music and dancing and art into the program, and people seem to enjoy it greatly. And so we ask, those of you who are providers, to make referrals to our Connect to Culture program, and people can just contact me at my email if they're interested in that. And then early stage support groups is an area that we've done in the past. We would like to try it again, where the person with early dementia and their partner can attend a special support group just for them. Um, or maybe an individual group just for the person with dementia. We're looking at that model and we're writing grants and trying to find funding for that to provide that special support for those living with early stage dementia. Okay. We also have a full section on legal planning, and we always have a legal planning expert, one of our elder law attorneys, who can talk to folks about planning for the future. We want people living with this disease to articulate their own wishes. So we tell them, be proactive, not reactive. Do you want to make these decisions for yourself, or do you want others making decisions for you later? And so, of course, we're talking about, durable powers of attorney for healthcare and for finance, financial planning, all of those things that are so critical for people so that they can have a voice in decision making about end of life. And after all, that's what we all want. We all want to go through a process where we're able to write out and articulate our wishes and talk to our agents that we designate about our plans. So that's critical for anyone over the age of 18, but especially critical for dementia families. We get into the area of safety. So if we have people in the university or on our helpline who are living alone, we recognize that they need more help and increasing support, and that over time they will no longer be able to live on their own. So we help them to plan how to have a good quality of life and to bring others into the equation so that they are safe. We also talk about medications. And I think the bottom line here is we encourage people to partner with their significant others, and that people should take their meds together. There should be oversight. It's very easy to skip doses or to overtake medication, and you certainly don't want that to affect your treatment. Gun safety, as I mentioned early on, we have a gun safety expert who comes out and talks about legal ways to divest yourself of firearms in the house, because we know that dementia and guns don't mix. And then, of course, we have a driving expert who comes out and talks about being evaluated for safe driving when you're in the early stages of the illness. So just because you have MCI or early dementia, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can no longer drive. But with driving, we know that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So we want to educate people about how driving changes with the brain changes that are occurring in these illnesses, and we want them to plan for alternative transportation. Of course, we have resources for all of that. So we go through, how those brain changes specifically impact driving ability. And you see all of the bullets here on the screen that become apparent when people are still driving, or potentially can become apparent. And not to mention, I mean, kind of the bottom line with this is that people have the potential to hurt themselves or others if they're driving unsafely. And there's an issue of liability. So a lot of times, once we explain to people that if they have a diagnosis and they're in an accident, they will probably not be covered. I mean, I can say that with pretty much authority that they won't be covered. And so when you have Alzheimer's disease and you're in an accident, you risk losing everything. And then finally, you risk getting lost while you're behind the wheel, which can happen in a familiar place. It becomes very disconcerting and problematic, can be very traumatic. I have one client who got lost one time and she finally made her way home and she just marched inside and handed the keys off to her husband and said, "I'm never driving again." And we actually do have people that go through Memory University that after hearing the lecture by the driving expert will decide to give up the keys. So here's a few warning signs. You can take a look at that. A lot of dents and people scraping the side of their driveways getting out. I mean, people with the illness often have visual spatial problems, so they're not a good judge of distance. And so they may be tailgating or they may get too close to other vehicles on the freeway. You see people having trouble with turns, particularly left-hand turns. Also trouble with those traffic lights. Maybe they're not seeing the colors quite the same way. And maybe they're not reading the street signs. So there's lots of things that can go wrong. Driving is a very complex process. We multitask when we're driving and we're paying attention to many things. And so when you have dementia, your ability to multitask is very diminished. So what we suggest is a driving evaluation that of course can be done at the DMV. It's supposed to be triggered by a physician report of dementia. That doesn't always happen. The physician doesn't always report it, or the DMV doesn't always follow through. And I understand that recently the DMV here in our area is waiving the written test for people over 70, I believe, altogether because they're so backed up. So you can also pay for a professional driving assessment. And there are we have resources. I think there's more than two. You can call our helpline and get those resources. But one is at St. Jude. I think maybe some of the other area hospitals might have them too. And then we also are very aware of the driving center. And that's Debbie Ricker's program. And she's the expert who's written a book on dementia and driving. And she comes out and speaks to our folks at Memory University. So she's an occupational therapist. She will do an evaluation, a thorough, exhaustive evaluation of someone's driving and let them know whether they're safe to drive or not. We touch on wandering. A lot of people don't wander ever, but over time, about 6 out of 10 folks with dementia will have one, if not multiple, wandering episodes. So, and it's not uncommon to feel disoriented with place and time sometimes. So, that brings us to our next poll question.
It is common for a person living with memory loss to have difficulty retracing their steps. Is that true or false? Again, go ahead and quickly answer the question. And if you're not able to answer, please put it in the chat box before the poll question closes. It is common for a person living with memory loss to have difficulty retracing their steps. True or false? Give it just a few more seconds and then we will go ahead and close. Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead.
I was going to go ahead and just give that to everyone because I actually didn't say that they have
They do.
difficulty retracing their steps, but it was a bullet on the slide. So good job, everyone. Okay. Yeah, so we're still talking about wandering a little bit, and we give some tips to people living with early stage dementia, let people know you're leaving, when to expect you back. Always keep a charged cell phone with you if you're out in the community. And you should, and this is good advice for all of us, we should all have our in case of emergency contacts stipulated on our cell phones. You know, you have an ability to put a little bright or a big bright red asterisk on your people that you want called in case of emergency. We also will give out forms where people are able to sign up for a medical alert found bracelet program that can be very helpful. And then also some of the cities, I'm not aware of all of them, but I do know, for example, in Irvine and Fullerton, they have their own return home program. So early stage folks can be registered with the police department with a photo on file and identifying information, and then everyone can be on the lookout for that person. Um, Another safety consideration is traveling. We advise people to really, oh my gosh, kind of simplify everything. If you're one of those families that's used to going to Europe and visiting 8 countries, you know, ratchet that back to maybe just two. We want you to leave a lot of time for scheduling, and a lot of time for breaks. That's what I meant to say. A lot of time for breaks in the scheduling. I'm clarifying. uh, Rest periods need to be part of that schedule, definitely. And it's nice if you can travel with a trusted friend or family member. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, a lot of airports have programs for individuals with different disabilities, including Alzheimer's. I know that our John Wayne, I know not everyone is local on this call, but I think the majority of people are. So there's a program at John Wayne that you can research, and it involves having escorts to gates and some kind of an identification so that staff can, you know, sort of keep on a lookout for people and make sure they're safe. So, you know, airports, train stations, etc., are bewildering places for people with dementia. You know, someone can go to the restroom and come out and go the wrong way and just get lost in the crowd. So we want to be very careful to keep people safe in those situations. And we want people, when they're traveling, to be ready with a backup plan in case there needs to be an adjustment made or you need to come home. I want to stress we don't tell people not to travel. Remember that bucket list that I mentioned, but we just want you to do this in a manner that's consistent with a slower pace and, you know, less opportunity for chaotic, you know, days, etc. So, and then again, that backup trip or backup plan. If you're traveling with a group, and you need to stay behind or you need to go on your own, those kinds of considerations should be thought through before you travel. Okay. Yeah, and then, you know, we're kind of getting into the end part of the discussion, and I just like to talk a little bit about how it's so important to examine your support network. So when people get the diagnosis, this is something that they should be looking at with their family because as we age, a lot of people fall off of our support network. They move away, they pass away. So if your support network is limited, you want to see if there's ways that you can repopulate it. And, you know, the support group or the support network has different layers, family and friends, the community, etc. So, you know, there's just some suggestions in the slides for how to improve that. So that people can continue to have a quality life as they go along. If you're working, you may find that responsibilities are becoming more difficult. You may want to reduce hours. I always talk to early stage people who are working about trying to go out on disability as opposed to getting fired from their jobs because of making mistakes. So, I mean, this is kind of goes along with your legal planning and your financial planning, but you want to plan for retirement. And because, a lot of this disease is financed, privately, and they're not, a lot of benefits, you want to make sure that that disability is a factor if your loved one is still working. Finally, some additional support, and I want to thank our client, Julie Moore, who is a person that's living with young onset Alzheimer's disease, and she has found that there aren't as many resources as there should be. But these are some of the ones that she has detected and is involved with and encourages people to know about. So there is the National Council of Dementia Minds, Teepa Snow, who many of you providers know as an expert dementia trainer. She has some great ideas about living a purposeful life when you have Alzheimer's disease. There's dementia mentors, and there is dementia caregiver support. So these links may not be in the slides that were sent out originally, so we're going to send out the links again, as well as a flyer for the Memory University so that you have that as a reference tool and so that you can make referrals when appropriate to our organization. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kim, for all of that great information. Before we get to the question and answer section, I just want to take a minute to remind everyone of the importance of being aware of implicit biases or unconscious stereotypes as we care for others. A best practice is a person-centered approach where we view each person that we care for as an individual with unique needs and preferences and treat them with dignity and respect, even when they are very different from ourselves. If we always listen carefully and respectfully so that we understand their perspectives, values, and preferences, we can build trust and provide the highest quality of care. Now, if you have any questions for Kim, please be sure to type them into the chat box in the taskbar. We do have a couple questions already in place, so stay with us. But before we begin, if we do run past 12:30, you are welcome to remain online to ask your questions or listen to the answers. But if you need to leave the webinar, you can. Just remember that if you want to earn CE credit, you need to be on for the full 60 minutes. And also, I want to take this time to thank our sponsors once more for making this presentation possible. We're so grateful for the support of O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, and Caring Companions at Home. This will be our last continuing education webinar for 2024, but we do have two special topic presentations coming up. November 27th will be on sleep apnea, and as Kim mentioned, sleep apnea is so important when talking about dementia. And then we will also have one on understanding clinical trials on December 11th. So now we will go ahead and get our questions in for Kim. Can anything be done to change medical records if a person gets a diagnosis of dementia that was temporary, so due to reversible cause? I've seen many cases where the inaccurate diagnosis prevents people from being accepted into assisted livings, even if the cause is treated and they are no longer having symptoms of dementia.
That is a new one for me. I haven't had that come up in the years that I've worked with individuals and families affected by dementia, but I would certainly say that like anything else when it comes to medical and hospitals, that you have to be an advocate for yourself and your family member, and you have to request those medical records, that request that they be changed, and then, look at them afterward to make sure that that happened. Um, Lauren, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say also taking it to a specialist. So if your primary care physician is the one that diagnosed you with dementia, or something along those lines, going to a neurologist, taking it a step above to get a real an intense exam. And then
Hmm.
hopefully from there, that can be corrected.
Yeah. I've only seen a couple of cases over time where people had the wrong diagnosis. And one that comes to mind is a gentleman that was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and he had sleep apnea. And once he treated it, his cognition, the problems resolved. And so, yeah, so I hope he got his medical records changed. I didn't think to inquire. Thank you.
Yes. So this is related to the conversation on driving safely in auto accidents. Are people with a diagnosis of MCI covered by their insurance, in the sense of how people with dementia, a diagnosis of dementia, are in a
Yeah.
tough spot?
Yeah, that actually just came up in the Memory University, and we felt like there was still a question of liability, even though MCI doesn't trigger a referral to the DMV. So doctors don't have to send the diagnosis of MCI. So, but yeah, I think Debbie Ricker was our speaker, and she felt like liability was still probably going to be an issue. The thing is, when you are driving with MCI or any of these cognitive impairments, you are driving impaired. And so it can lead to nothing good. I really err on the side of caution with driving. I mean, I feel like if it happened to me, I would surrender my keys immediately. So I think that it's still kind of nebulous, but I would be afraid that you would still be liable.
Um, any,
Insurance companies don't want to pay.
yes,
So,
they, any reason not to.
yeah.
Any recommendations for how to handle a loved one who is in denial about their memory loss?
Yeah, so I do have a recommendation about that. It does no good to hit them over the head with it. There are people who never acknowledge that they have the disease, and you just carry on and you care for them. Denial is a force that protects us from a shock of something that's just too great to take in all at once. And so, most people's denial resolves over time. It takes time to get them to acceptance, but for some people, it never happens. And so I'm just really not a fan of trying to hammer the point home with them. I cared personally for a woman for 6 years who never knew she had Alzheimer's disease. She didn't admit it. I took her, through the diagnosis all the way to her death, 6 years later, and she was in her 90s. So, but she never acknowledged it. And if she heard the word, she'd say, "Oh, yeah, that's a bad one." So she never knew. But what difference does it make to the care? You're going to give the same great care regardless of what their feeling is. I hope that answers the question.
Mhm. Does one need to be an Orange County resident to participate in Memory U?
If you are willing to drive here, then you could participate if you're eligible. And let me just talk about the criteria for a moment. We require that people in the uh, university be aware. This maps back to our last question. They need to be aware of their diagnosis, and be willing to talk about it. So they have to be early enough in the illness to be eligible, and they have to be willing and able to talk about it with others. If we have someone who's in denial in Memory U, and they're saying, "Well, I don't know why I'm here. There's nothing wrong with me," that sort of undermines what the other individuals who are living with the illness are going through. And undermines their experience and just doesn't help to foster a group feeling. So, but coming from a distance is fine as long as you're willing to make the drive.
So we have a couple people that are talking about our program, the 6-week university, Living Well with Early Memory Loss program. Are you aware of any resources for people either living on the East Coast, not in California, to access for this information? I could speak to another program, but I wanted to give you the opportunity first.
Yeah, I think the Alzheimer's Association, definitely, because they have, even though we're not a part of them any longer, uh, I'm reminded that they have a wonderful network of chapters throughout the country. And so you can look at the state where your person of concern is located and go on their website and see if they have a similar program. And they do call this program Living Well with Early Memory Loss, I believe. They still call it that. We we use the name Memory University, but it's very similar material. So Alzheimer's Association is another resource for people with early stage. We want people to use all the resources. It's a tough illness, and so the more help, the better.
Yes, and I was also going to mention from our presenter last month, Dr. Carson, there is the DEAR program in Nevada, and they have a very similar 6-week program, but they do it online as well. So for those that maybe aren't able to go in person for whatever reason. So all of this information that Kim is talking about, I will send it out to everybody so that you'll
Okay.
have all of this information. Um, so we're getting close to the end. A few questions that are still in the chat box, but more related to the helpline. So I'll provide that information afterwards. But any final questions anybody would like to ask?
While you're deliberating on that, I just want to add a statement about early stage programs, and that is that we don't have enough. We simply don't have enough. And we're lucky here locally that Julie, our friend Julie, was able to provide us with some of those resources. And we are actively seeking opportunities through grants, as I mentioned earlier, to develop more programming. But I will say again about Memory University that I think the beauty of it is that it provides an introduction to our organization. It makes people feel like they're part of our family, and they tend to remain with us as we help them through the long trajectory of the illness. So, yeah,
Thank you.
yes,
So
of
that brings
course.
that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar. Thank you so much to our presenter, Kim. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us.